to have a little short keynote by Mark Rostick from Intel Capital. So Mark is not only in charge of venture and investments at Intel Capital, but he's also involved in a lot of strategy and business development. And the great news is that he is, thankfully for us, he's flown down all the way from North Carolina out here just to be with us. So thank you so much. Mark, would you like to come up and...
Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thanks for having me. You know, I'm not going to make this a keynote. I promise not to bore you with that long a talk. What I really want to do is just give you some statistics and a little bit of, insight maybe that will kick things off, and then we'll get into the discussion so you can ask the smarter guys over there the real hard questions. But as I was thinking about coming up here, I was thinking about sort of the three seminal events in my own experience with mobile technology. I'm a recovering ex-lawyer, and in an earlier life I practiced law in Charleston, South Carolina, and in 1991 the firm I worked for bought a bag phone that we could use while we were on the road. And I don't know if any of y'all have used a bag phone back in the day, but it had a magnetic antenna that was about 1.5 feet tall that you stuck on top of your car. And then the phone receiver itself was about the size of this notebook. And you sort of held it up to your, and driving while talking on that thing just brings a whole new level to the game of irresponsible driving. So that was my first event. The second one was, fast forward, I moved away from practicing law. I ended up working for a venture organization in Silicon Valley called Intel Capital. And we were early investors in RIM. And so the prize for that, in part, in addition to having made a pretty good bit of money on the investment, was that we were all early adopters of the original RIM pager. And the miracle of email on that thing it was like the sun came out that morning. I can remember sitting in a conference room with Les Videz, who was an Intel board member, employee number 4, and who ran our group at the time. And we all just sent each other emails, just giggling about how cool it was, that we had email. The third was, of course, when the iPhone came out, and you saw what computing in your hand with that interface could really do. And so, those are the three so far, and maybe tonight we're going to be talking about what the fourth is, but I thought that was an interesting continuum. I went from this, 3-pound bag phone, God knows how many brain cells I fried using that antenna, within 4 feet of my head, to, an iPhone. But let me give you just a couple statistics sort of to get things going. And these are from Mobile Future Forward. I took my notes on my phone just in the spirit of, eating the dog food tonight. But, so this is from Q2 of 13. The mobile data market for the quarter in the U.S., these are U.S. numbers, was $21 billion. That's just data. And that represents 46% of all mobile services mobile services revenue for the quarter. So people expect that the crossover point for data over voice will be sometime later this year. So pretty interesting statistic that now data, we all think about it that way, but data revenue will now outstrip voice revenue by the end of 2019. That represents about a 14% year-over-year growth on the data side. What I thought was interesting, so mobile data for the year will be about a $90 billion industry, just in the U.S. for the mobile operators. So, think about what that was less than 10 years ago. It's pretty amazing. A gigantic new ecosystem has been created. And everybody thinks the web was the big thing, but that's $90 billion that didn't exist even in 1998, 99, when we all thought the web was changing the world, which of course it did. I thought a couple other things. There were slightly more Android devices than iOS devices attached to the networks in Q2, which is an interesting shift, right? In the rest of the world, Android far outpaces iOS, but that hasn't been the case in the US. 87% of all phones sold in the quarter were smartphones, and now about 60% of the phones in the US are smartphones. So we think, okay, well, game's over in the US, right? Smartphones are fully penetrated, 87%. What's interesting is only 35% of US households have a smartphone. There are, and I'm going to read this, there are 148 million wireless subscribers in the US who still don't have a smartphone. So think about what that means for the growth of the data business, the potential for that growth moving forward. And the segments of the market we haven't addressed. What does that mean for the cost of mobile devices? What does that mean for what kind of plans those folks may want? What are the uses that they have that we haven't taken advantage of yet, so that they haven't availed themselves of a technology that we view as miraculous, right? One other stat I thought was interesting. How many of you are familiar with WhatsApp? So WhatsApp is a messaging platform, over the top, right? The number of messages that WhatsApp sent in the last quarter was greater than the combined messaging of all the US and Chinese mobile operators. So they sent more messages than all the operators in the US and China combined. So that gives you a sense of the power of the mobile web. I'm sure my friends here from AT&T are thinking, where do I go get those guys, right? Because that's off-platform traffic that really is an interesting dynamic that everybody's going to have to kind of contemplate. It's the wireless analog to the over-the-top TV service that the cable and telco service providers are concerned about as well. So what do we think the next big trends are? I think Sig's going to talk some more about this, but we can click off a bunch of them. People are talking about wearables, wallets, TV everywhere, the human-machine interface, so how do we interact? Do we use voice? Do we use gesture? Do we hold it up in front of things and it tells us, what's going on? Flexible OLEDs, organic light-emitting diode-based displays. So for things like wearables, has anybody seen pictures of what everybody thinks the Samsung watch is going to look like, or the Apple iWatch? They're all curved, right? They are not flat. So, and I think the Samsung OLED curved TV, if I'm not mistaken, just got price reduced to $9,000. Might be 10, but I forget if that's but it's also, if I'm not mistaken, it's 4K, so Ultra HD TV. So there isn't any content available, but it's very cool. That's coming up. VC and mobile. This data is admittedly a little bit dated, but I wanted to it'll set some context as well. $3.9 billion of venture capital went into mobile applications, infrastructure, mobile companies in the first half of 2012. That represented almost half, 46% of all venture dollars invested. So that gives you a sense of the relative importance. So what's interesting about that is tracking pretty closely to what data services are as a percentage of mobile operator revenue. So, I guess, and that was about a year ahead, right? So maybe VC is doing its job. It's getting out in front of the market by 12 months or so. Maybe we should be further ahead. But I thought that was an interesting sort of corollary or sort of comparison to make. If you look at that spend or that investment as an R&D budget for the mobile world, there are only 3 companies in the world that spend more than that on an annual basis. Those would be Samsung, Intel, and Microsoft in the technology world. So it's interesting to see that's the sort of scale of investment that is pouring into everything from mobile apps to what goes into a mobile pop in terms of equipment and infrastructure. The 2 biggest areas for investment were infrastructure and applications. It comes as no surprise. Some of the, just to give you a sense, so I am from Intel Capital, and we are very active in this area. Just to give you a sense of where we invested is a little bit of a flavor. We've certainly done things. We have a portfolio company called Aperion, which is in the mobile applications management space. Some of you have looked at things like mobile device management, where mobile application management is a little bit different. So how do you manage your applications inside an enterprise as opposed to just devices? We've done things in wearables. We have a company we invested in called Basis, which is has an optical sensor you can wear on your wrist to provide biometric data. We've done an investment in mobile payments, a company called Fortumo in Germany. You may have heard of. M-Foundry is a mobile banking and payments application. We've done a bunch of stuff in infrastructure, obviously, because our world is all about bringing intelligence to every device you pick up. We're going to obviously make investments in things for your device, graphics, media, compute, antennas. One of our larger investments is a company called Skycross that provides antennas to some of the largest mobile OEMs in the world. Just to give you an example of the breadth of what we're doing. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of context for what we want to talk about tonight. It gives you a sense of what Intel thinks is interesting. One of the things I would tell you is that while I gave you a lot of US-centric numbers, this is happening everywhere in the world. We've made mobile investments in India, China, Russia, Brazil, pretty much everywhere you can think of where you can do a venture investment. Mobile is almost more important than wireline, particularly in places that don't have pre-existing infrastructure, because it's a communication link and a data link you didn't have before, and it goes up much more quickly. That doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it happens as fast as anybody wants, but it is an area of keen focus pretty much everywhere. And the last company I looked at was all about how do we get more smartphones into Africa, just to give you a sense of the breadth and depth of where people are. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Corinne or Sig.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call Sig and we'll all take our places up here in the hot seats. I think they are. But thank you again for having me. I appreciate it and look forward to the discussion.